So Canada has a grown-up in charge, while Trump is turning America into the Patriot Games.
One country quietly gets on with governing. The other just pitched a 250th birthday celebration that feels like a political version of the Hunger Games.
And if you thought the Hunger Games was just fiction, well, you clearly have not seen the White House's latest press release.
He didn't just announce a track meet. He announced the Patriot Games. One boy, one girl from every state and territory traveling to the Capitol to compete for the amusement of the president.
And he didn't stop at the games either. He announced a triumphal arch because apparently the Lincoln Memorial wasn't dramatic enough. He also slapped his name onto the Kennedy Center and turned the presidential portrait hallway into a petty grievance gallery for every leader who ever bruised his ego.
And while Trump is busy staging reality TV politics, north of the border, Prime Minister Carney is doing the most radical thing you can do in 2025. He's acting like an adult.
And that's the contrast. Trump builds a spectacle, Carney builds a budget. One is obsessed with cameras and his crowd sizes. The other is obsessed with whether you can actually afford groceries.
We are barely 12 months into Trump's presidency. I thought the dystopian collapse would take at least 2 years. But instead, we're speed-running right into the apocalypse.
And the cherry on top? A UFC fight on the White House lawn. Because in his world, the front yard of the nuclear codes is just another pay-per-view stage. And meanwhile, in Canada, the so-called boring prime minister you don't see melting down on TV is quietly steering us away from the cliff.
So today, we're going to walk you through Trump's Patriot Games circus, the arch, the pageant, the wall of presidents, and then show you why, for once, Canada picked the right kind of boring.
So grab a snack, hug your democracy, and let's get into it.
Let's start with the concept. It's going to be huge, the best games ever. We have one of the best teenagers in the world. One boy, one girl. No men in women's sports. Oh, unless it's a UFC fight on the lawn, then anything goes.
He literally turned the 250th birthday of the United States into a pitch for a reality show where teenagers become props for his ego. He's describing a national celebration like he's programming a streaming platform.
This isn't about sport. If it was about sport, he'd be talking about scholarships, training programs, and investment in kids' health. Instead, he's talking about pageantry, uniforms, and how great it'll look on television.
And look at the pattern. The rules are only strict when they punish people he doesn't like. No men and women's sports, big speeches, big applause lines. But when it's fight night on the lawn and it gets some attention, well, suddenly every line blurs as long as the cameras are rolling and his name is on the banner. Now, for our American viewers, and we know a lot of you are watching this from your own version of District 12, this isn't us sitting up here in Canada laughing at you.
No, we're worried. We're watching this as your neighbors. We're just about 5 meters from the fence on the same fault line, and we're going, hey, if that roof goes, we're going to catch all the debris.
We've had our own bad leaders, sure. We've had our own scandals. We're not pretending Canada is perfect. But when your president starts planning literal games with teenagers, demolishing historic buildings for monuments, trying to slap his name on the Kennedy Center, and then signing off with, "Thank you for your attention in this matter," you're not in a policy debate anymore. You're in a personality cult.
And by the way, given his long, well-documented ties to Jeffrey Epstein, the last thing this president should be doing is marketing a made-for-TV competition built around teenagers and his personal patriotic fantasies.
And here's the part that really nobody wants to think about. When this kind of regime gets worse, people don't just tweet, they leave.
If this keeps going, that border stops being a shopping trip and starts looking like a refugee line. The Handmaid's Tale wasn't meant to be a cross-border travel guide.
We already get messages from Americans asking, how do I move to Canada? Now imagine that multiplied by millions. People just looking for a country where the head of government isn't hosting teen tournaments and cage matches on the lawn.
And up here, our prime minister starts looking less like a prime minister and more like the last sane leader in the room on Earth. He's one of the only leaders on this planet who isn't bowing to Trump. He isn't chasing a photo op with him, and he isn't arranging his policy just to impress him.
And it's not just him. Look at the cabinet the PM has built. We've got Melanie Joly out telling it straight and talking to allies instead of setting diplomatic fires for attention. We've got ministers who can answer questions without launching into a rant about their enemies list.
And it's not just Ottawa. Look at the premiers who've decided, maybe keeping the country functional matters right now. Doug Ford is actually working with the feds instead of picking fights for sport.
Wab Kinew in Manitoba, David Eby in BC, people who are not exactly ideological twins with Carney still manage to show up, sit at the same table, and get things done. Heck, even Danielle Smith has dialed it back a notch because the contrast with the chaos down south is that brutal.
And that's the wild part. Canada isn't suddenly a political utopia. There's floor crossings and drama. We still argue, we still screw things up, and we still have big fights ahead. But compared to what's happening in Washington, it looks like a functioning adult group project.
Because, well, Trump is modeling his presidency on every dystopian story he's ever half-watched. The Running Man, The Long Walk, The Hunger Games, The Handmaid's Tale. Our guys are at least trying to keep the lights on and the hospitals open.
And here's the irony, Dave. The people who created those stories, Stephen King, Margaret Atwood, the star of The Hunger Games, Jennifer Lawrence, they've all publicly said they can't stand what Trump represents.
And that tells you everything, because the guy is basically remixing the nightmares that they warned us about. And the artists who wrote them are on the record saying, this is exactly what we were afraid of.
It fits what we said in yesterday's video that you can check out in the links below or right here, that he has always hated the country he's running. Nobody has ever given him the respect he thinks he deserves. Not Hollywood, not New York businesses, not the people. He hates them for that. And yet, it feels like he just wants to be loved by the same elites, artists, and institutions that have rejected him for decades.
So he grabs their stories, their imagery, their language, and twists it into some weird tribute act, hoping that if he builds enough arches or hosts enough games, the people who shunned him will finally clap.
Meanwhile, the rest of us are stuck living in the reboot, trying to keep our own countries from becoming extras in his fan fiction novel.
But in this movie, Trump is the overacting villain, waving his arms in every single scene. Carney is the one actually carrying the story. He's the hero fighting back against the arena. Part Arnold Schwarzenegger in The Running Man, part Katniss Everdeen refusing to play along, part handmaid who decided she's done taking orders. He's not the chaos, he's the counterpunch.
Now let's talk about this triumphal arch, because this part really tells you where his head is at.
Most leaders say, let's fix health care. He says, let's build a giant arch so people have to walk under my ego on the way to work.
He's already had the East Wing torn down, historic rooms, public spaces, staff offices gone. In their place, a giant construction pit and a $400 million ballroom project that nobody voted on and almost nobody understands, except the donors on his guest list.
So while regular people are wondering how to pay for rent and insulin, he's busy turning part of the White House into a private event space big enough to seat nearly 1,000 of his closest friends. Well, behind 5-inch glass, of course, because nothing says man of the people like a bunker ballroom where you can toast yourself while the country falls apart outside.
It's the architectural version of editing yourself into every scene of a movie. He's not content with portraits inside. He wants the building itself to scream his name, just in case anyone forgets who he thinks the main character is.
And then there's the wall of presidents, portraits lined up like hockey cards along the colonnade, with new plaques that he helped write, of course, trashing Obama and Biden and anyone who bruised his ego, while his own section reads like a campaign ad carved into stone.
I know. It all sounds like satire. It feels made up, but it's real. We are living in a world where the guy in charge builds a propaganda hallway at the White House, and people still tell us we're the ones overreacting.
That's not history, people. That's branding. It's what people do when they're terrified of being forgotten. Only dictators build monuments to themselves while they're still in power. Other presidents got statues after they died because their legacy earned it. Trump knows he doesn't have that. He knows the minute he's gone, people will try to scrub his mess out of the story. So he's forcing the monuments up now so that the country has to walk past them whether they want to or not.
And now we get to the Kennedy Center. The board he stacked has already unanimously voted to rename it the Trump Kennedy Center. They're taking a living memorial to a murdered president and turning it into a shared logo with Trump like it's some corporate merger.
It feels like somebody's bad dystopian script, right? But it's not. It's real. We're watching a president slap his name on a congressionally designated memorial because he apparently saved the building. While the Kennedy family and half of Washington are going, can't just rebrand history because you're bored. We're not just watching 1984, we're living through the rebranding phase.
Now, put the Patriot Games, the Arch, the renamed Kennedy Center idea, and the Wall of Presidents together, and that's where it goes from silly to sinister.
You don't propose a giant stone arch, a presidential wall of fame, and teenage games tournament by accident. That's the full package. Spectacle, loyalty, fear, all rolled into one show.
Just picture it. Teams from all 50 states and territories marching through the arch, saluting the wall, and stepping onto the field while commentators remind everyone who made this all possible.
That's not a birthday party. That's a loyalty ritual with better lighting.
And you know who doesn't send their kids to this, Dave? The donors, the billionaires, the families sitting in private boxes with their names on stadiums.
Yeah, they're not sending little Madison and Braden down to the Patriot Games. It's the kids from the towns where the factory closed, the hospital merged, and the school lost its arts program. The same people already paying for every one of his economic experiments.
Now, let's talk about those comments underneath this announcement, because that's where the real story is.
You have people saying that this is what America needs, that this will bring back pride. They're typing on their phones that they can't afford to replace while their rent just went up.
They imagine themselves in the Capitol, sitting in the stands, singing along with their national anthem and feeling powerful. But everything about their day-to-day life screams District 12.
If your healthcare is a GoFundMe link, if your paycheck disappears the second that you pay rent, if your kid's school is holding bake sales just to buy basic supplies, you're not in the VIP section of this story, people.
Nope. You're the audience being told that watching other people compete for crumbs is patriotic.
And that's the real trick here. Distract people with patriotic entertainment while quietly shredding the stuff that actually makes a country strong. Schools, hospitals, infrastructure, free press. Ooh, fair courts.
And then there's his favorite sign-off on Truth Social. Thank you for your attention in this matter. Which, by the way, is straight out of the Hunger Games. That's literally how the Capitol wrapped up every time they quietly changed the rules of the games in the middle of the arena.
That's not how a democratic leader talks to its citizens. That's how an overlord talks to an audience. It's the tone of someone who thinks the whole country is trapped in his stadium and should be grateful that he even issued a statement. When your president starts sounding like a Capitol announcement, you don't have a communication problem, you have a system problem.
It tells you exactly how he sees his job, not as a public service and not as a stewardship for the people, but as a constant performance. He doesn't want accountability, he just wants attention. And that's why you get Patriot Games instead of policy. You get arches instead of plans. You get lawn fights instead of legislation.
So let's actually pull the camera back a bit and zoom out what all this really means. When a leader starts using kids as props, monuments as mirrors, and sports as a weapon, it's not random chaos. That's a deliberate style of control.
You turn politics into entertainment so people stop asking the boring questions like, why is housing impossible? Why is healthcare collapsing? Why are my rights shrinking while your inner circle of immunity grows bigger?
If the main event is always another show, another parade, another fight night, then there's never ever time to ask, wait, are we the ones in the arena?
And that's the point. If you're arguing online about which state has the strongest teenagers, you're not asking why the president is obsessed with punishing his critics and rewarding his friends. So where does this leave us? On one side, you have the Patriot Games, the Arch, the Wall of Presidents, the cage fight on the lawn, a leader who treats the 250th anniversary like a personal festival.
But on the other side, you have a country still trying to act like a democracy instead of a theme park. A prime minister who bores people with budget details instead of terrifying them with birthday plans.
One path is loud, addictive, and exhausting. The other is steady, slow, and frankly a little bit nerdy.
I know which one I want running a nuclear state. I want the nerd with the spreadsheet, not the showman demanding teenagers march through an arch with his name on it.
The Hunger Games was supposed to be a warning, not a project plan.
So, here's the question for everybody today. For Canadians and Americans watching, are you okay being cast as background characters in someone else's fantasy? Or are you ready to be the ones who say no to the arena?
And do me a favor, can you share this with the mega superfan in your life and ask them to comment? We genuinely want to hear from them because we can honestly not wrap our heads around how anyone still looks at all of this and says, oh yeah, this is great.
But keep it respectful, keep it honest, but if they got a defense of this circus, we're all ears.
Okay, everybody, let's wrap this up on the final day before Christmas holidays. And if you're new here, welcome to the chaos-adjacent corner of the internet. I'm Deb, and this is Dave, and we talk politics and why democracy is worth fighting for.
And if you're here for travel, head over to the Planet D Travel for travel advice, tips, and the best of the 130 countries we've visited over the past 20 years.
Hit like so this gets out to the algorithm basement and drop a comment to tell us, if your leader announced something like the Patriot Games, what would you do?
And if you want to go deeper with us, join the A-Team, check out the links below, and stick around for the next video because it's going to be a good one.
So take care of yourselves this holiday season and take care of each other.
And may your leaders never ever decide they need a teenage arena to feel important.